Okay, despite multi-factor authentication being mandatory in some sectors like, I guess, finance and government spring to mind, adoption across UK organisations is, I think, I'm right in saying, remains fairly low. Why do you think it is that so many organisations are still unprotected in this way? And are there any particular misconceptions or barriers when it comes to, implementing MFA?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. In fact, it's borne out in the recent government security breaches survey, where they said that would you believe, only 40% of businesses have deployed MFA as standard. So, really, what businesses need to do is to do the simple things that have the biggest impact, and deploying the right MFA solution allows them to do that. I think maybe the potential issues that people are thinking of, which aren't actually the case, is that with any security offering that is user-based, there's always concerns on, one, how easy is it to use, and also how easy is it to deploy. And this is the areas that we've been focusing on as well. So we've got multiple deployment methods, be it public or private cloud, on-premise, all the way to ultra-secure environments that require on-premise and also air-gap. So in other words, no connection to the public internet. So deployment's key. The other one is the user experience. So again, we focus on that. So we've got multiple options, such as using it on your phone or hardware tokens. So as long as that bump in the road is taken away, then it should be quite straightforward for organisations to deploy MFA.
Okay, and we can't have a conversation about IT without mentioning the two letters AI. And I guess in terms of security, AI generated deepfakes, phishing, social engineering, all sorts of things going on. So how has the nature, if you like, of credential-based attacks evolved in the last year or so, but bearing in mind what AI is now enabling the bad folks to get up to?
Yeah, I think what you'll find with AI and what's being looked at is AI is potentially doing a lot of the heavy lifting. You still need that hacker intervention to do it. But what we're looking at is, the most recent attacks that have had the biggest impact. If we look at the things like Jaguar Land Rover, M&S, and the Co-op, that's been basically around financial gain, so ransomware. But it's also been focusing on the human psychology and the fragilities. So it's been using things like MFA bombing. So this is why doing the basic, deploying what's called phishing-resistant MFA, will allow businesses to clear off a big area of their security concerns, and then allow them to then concentrate on the more sophisticated attacks. NIST in the USA have made it very, very clear that what they've said is it's very simple. Just turn on MFA today. And this actually has been echoed by organisations like NCSC here in the UK and other global national security organisations, where they're saying deploy the basics, deploy phishing-resistant MFA.
Okay, and in terms of hacks, I think I'm right in saying that about 80% of them stem from weak passwords, and even more, I think nearer 90% involve stolen credentials. Any thoughts as to why password-related risks are still quite so pervasive? And is there anything that leadership teams can do or prioritize in terms of reducing those kind of vulnerabilities?
Yeah. So the fact that user credentials are being leaked and are available to hackers, on the dark web or via phishing, it always does come back to that adding, more levels of security around identity. All roads do currently point to MFA, especially, as I say, that next generation of MFA. But it also makes good business sense as well, to attract consumers. 2/3 of consumers have said that they would trust a brand that they were buying from that had MFA. So both B2B and also B2C environments need, and in some cases demand, MFA. So it should be the first thing that is deployed, and the security posture is then built from there.
Okay, and in terms of that MFA, perhaps it'd be good if you could explain a little bit more about phishing-resistant MFA and also FIDO2-based authentication. What are they involved? And I guess importantly, how they differ from legacy MFA approaches that maybe rely on SMS or the one-time code approach.
Yeah, sure. So phishing-resistant MFA uses something called FIDO2-based authentication, and FIDO2 or Fast Identity Online. It's an open standard for strong and passwordless authentication. So what it does, it actually involves using cryptographic keys that are stored on either the user's device or a physical security key to prove possession. So it makes it immune to phishing attacks that trick users into giving up codes. Traditional MFA like SMS codes or push notifications relies on shared secrets that are vulnerable to interception through things like phishing or SIM swapping, or as we've seen recently, the MFA bombing.
Yeah, I was going to come on to some of those things. So cyber criminals are increasingly using techniques. You mentioned MFA fatigue, bombing, MFA bypass, and I think session hijacking are the ones that spring to mind. In terms of what those attacks look like in practice and ways that organizations can defend against them, what thoughts have you got to share?
Yeah, so as I said to you, this really concentrates on the human element. Okay, and there's 4 or 5 stages to it. So the first one is really getting the credentials. Okay, so what the attacker needs to do first of all is get the username and the password of the person that they want to attack, and they can either do that by a separate phishing activity, or even purchasing them from the dark web. Okay, so once they've got that, they then initiate the attack. So the hacker uses those stolen credentials to actually then log on to the victim's account, which then triggers that MFA process. And what they then do is trigger it lots of times. Basically, they push so many MFA notifications to the user that they effectively get fatigue. They're just there and they're going with this constant barrage of alerts. That is making them less alert because they keep getting them, and then they just click approve. It's either out of annoyance or confusion, or really just to stop the notifications from coming through. And then they've gained access. Once the user has approved the notification, the attacker has been authorized and they're into and have got access to that account. So the number one thing really to do is, as I say, deploy that phishing resistant MFA. And it's not just us pushing that mandate. As I said, you've had security agencies in both Canada, UK, America, Australia, so it's the NCSC, it's the FBI, has said to counteract the scattered spider MFA bombing attacks that we've seen this year, is that they've made it very simple. They've just said, look, enable and enforce phishing resistant multi-factor authentication. But what we've done is we've taken things a step further. So we've got other things to enhance that. So things like anomaly detection or help desk verification, and also impossible travel detection. So what that is you may log in today in London and then log in again in 10 minutes from somewhere thousands of miles away. So obviously there's something not right there. So we've added extra features to the phishing resistant MFA.
Okay, and I'm guessing for the next question that potentially covers internal threats when it comes to accidental behaviors, because I think MFA fatigue, maybe we could add to that sort of poor cyber hygiene. But I'm also wondering in terms of the internal threat surface in intentional insider risks, how else can organizations deal with that sort of internal threat surface?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the principles are exactly the same. If you're trying to protect from the outside, also protect from the inside. So what you need to be doing is that you need to be locking down access using authentication. Okay, so that you're not only protecting your business from outside, but also from inside, but you're also protecting the network elements as well, but also very importantly the key applications that are being used. So not only you stopping people from externally coming in, but you're also making sure the right people are using the right things at the right time.
Again, many organizations are exploring or maybe even using single sign-on and passwordless authentication. In terms of the practical benefits and any potential pitfalls when integrating these technologies into sort of existing architectures, any thoughts to share there?
Yeah, so if we look specifically at single sign-on or SSO, as it's called, it's exactly that. You sign in once, and that gives you access to multiple applications. So the benefits from that is it makes it a very smooth user experience, and therefore improves productivity. And there's less passwords to remember as well. So there's less IT help desk requests for password users. So it makes it a lot easier. Now, some of the cons is it could be a single point of failure, or it could be difficult to deploy, and you've got to make sure that all the applications are actually supported. But it ultimately makes it more efficient, and it makes it a far better user experience.
Okay, and then moving on to automated data discovery, it seems to become pretty much foundational for compliance, risk management, and even customer protection. How does it support Indeed? It does, broader identity and access management strategies.
Yeah. So at the moment, there's so many regulations, there's so many legislations that demand the management and, importantly, the visibility of consumer and customer data. As we all know, it's the fundamentals of GDPR. If you can't see what data you have, how can you manage it? And this is where we come in with one of our solutions, data discovery. So it allows you to actually see the data and manage the data. It's as simple as that.
And in terms of quantifying the damage when things go wrong, I guess that's financial and reputation, which I guess isn't perhaps less tangible. In terms of, I guess, when we're talking specifically here about inadequate MFA or access management controls, did you have any? I guess it obviously varies from organisation to organisation, but is there any sort of typical figures quoted as to what happens financially and or just reputation of organisations?
Yeah, I think to be honest, I think the biggest thing is trust. It's how do you feel when that there's been a breach, and and that trust in that organization, that's not tangible, but it does have a financial impact. You can it has an impact on the customer retention and your reputation, as you say. But also we can be looking at more financial things around loss of productivity that ultimately has an impact on share value. But that trust and maintaining that trust is, I think, one of the most important things. But if you look at some of the financials, if we look at the Jaguar Land Rover attack this year, it's going to cost them about 200 million in direct cyber related expenses. And then also for the quarter ending September this year, there was losses. I think it was over 480 million. But also, let's look at the UK economic impact. They're saying it's going to be around about 1.9 billion. So it's on track to be the costliest cybersecurity attack in UK history. But the other piece as well, which is really, really important, is don't forget the human cost. Think about people's livelihoods. Think about people's well-being from such an attack, which again you can't put money on, but has got a massive impact.
In terms of the sort of key UK regulatory requirements and any specific government or agency guidance around multi-factor authentication and secure access, and maybe, I mean, clearly many companies operate in a global environment, so I don't know if there are any other bits of regulation to mention, but are there any changes that organizations need to prepare? So I guess what's coming down the line, I mean, as you mentioned, GDPR, and there's a whole host of other things depending on what industry you're in, but are there more things that people are going to have to get used to in the near future?
Yeah. So as I said, the one, it makes just good business sense. It just makes good business sense. Consumers want it, so that there's a positive for deploying it, not only for your own personnel but also for the consumers that may use the business. But also, as I say, the National Cybersecurity Centre, so NCSC in the UK, have said, yeah, you've got to be deploying this. You've got to be deploying phishing resistant MFA. But then in the UK, with the UK government, there's something called the Cyber Essentials scheme, and in particular Cyber Essentials Plus. So that verifies organisations that have got necessary technical controls to defend against common cyber attacks. And what they say in Cyber Essentials Plus is that MFA is mandatory for all cloud services. So, and it's an automatic failing for non-compliance. But then if we look into the more consumer side of things, so the payment card industry, so there's a standard called PCI DSS. Again, MFA is mandated. And if we look wider afield, so in Europe for NIS2, again, it mandates where possible to use MFA. So it's not just proper business sense, it's also being regulated in some cases there's legislation as well.
Okay, and your organization clearly has a long history when it comes to MFA and data protection. Can you just give us some idea of what makes the company's approach unique in terms of things like frictionless MFA, on-prem deployment, VPN access, and just, I guess, the breadth of solutions you've got in the portfolio?
Yeah. So, MFA is what we do. It's in our DNA. It's so important. So it's so important that organizations should be using a vendor that specializes in it. And as I've said before, our key areas is really ease of use and deployment. Multiple deployment options, as I say, cloud, on-prem, protecting that data sovereignty, but also making sure that it's very easy to use for the actual user. So either as I say, with the mobile or passwordless or even token based. And we're a British-born and bred organisation based here in the UK, and we've been doing it for over 22 years. We've got 22 years of security product development and support with global deployments across multiple verticals, and also we're really proud to say that we've got 2 Queen's Awards for what we do. One for innovation and one for export.
Okay, and maybe just finally, I think that there's a reasonable amount of recent research that stresses the importance of, if you like, fundamental cyber hygiene, which I guess means that getting the basics right is still the highest, or amongst the highest ROI for organizations. I suppose the question is, are you surprised that there are still quite a lot of organizations maybe not doing that? And would you agree that those basics are the place to start, and they do bring the best returns?
Yeah, it is, and you're right. You've mentioned a couple of words that I was going to say. It's doing the basics right and fast. That's what's critical. If you can deploy a solution like ours, it will allow you to mitigate those basic attacks. Okay, and then businesses can then look at the more sophisticated attacks, know that they've actually done the simple and straightforward things. Deploying MFA will allow you to eliminate the majority of security issues very quickly and very efficiently. And as I said before, as NIST said in the US, it's very, very simple. Just turn on MFA today.
Excellent. I mean, it's been great to chat, and thank you so much for showing so many great insights into MFA and wider cybersecurity topics. So, Michael, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Much appreciated.